Welcome to Conversations with KidCare Canada. I'm your host, Estelle Paget. With me to talk about not just the baby blues is a woman who's eminently qualified to do this, Carolyn Solomon, who is the manager of maternal and women's health with the Ministry of Health here in British Columbia. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you for having me today, Estelle. It's my pleasure to be here.
It's so lovely. So what we're going to do is, in a few minutes, I'm going to ask you to share a key message that you have for viewers today. But if we could start with a little bit more information about who you are, what's brought you to this role that you have today?
So I'm a nurse with experience in a number of different clinical practice settings, including the hospital setting, and working in the community as a public health nurse for a number of years, supporting women and families that are experiencing vulnerabilities. And I feel that this is a really important work as we know the impact that mental health has on both the health of women, families, and we know that it's foundational for lifelong health of children. I have a real passion for improving health services for women and families in the province so that they can live lives that really speak to their ability to parent well, to thrive, and to support optimal health outcomes.
So you've mentioned that the early years are foundational for health. Is that why you feel it is so important to support new parents?
So all new parents require support, both emotional and practical support. So it's really about providing that circle of support for families so that they can grow and thrive, and also support their children to live to the best of their potential and have positive health outcomes for women, children, and families.
Now, our topic is postpartum depression today, perinatal and postpartum depression. You wanted us to look at a video about the myth of motherhood, and we'll take a look at that right now.
In a society that, as mothers, you need to be these pillars of strength and support and love and look amazing and feel good and have all these friends and cook meals and all of those kinds of things. If you have these feelings of super darkness, it's just like you're a monster or something,
The myth of motherhood is that accepted social opinion or attitude about what motherhood should look like and what motherhood should feel like. And basically it is that motherhood is the epitome of a woman's life, that women feel immensely fulfilled and joyful when they have a baby, and many women actually do. But that a woman is joyful and happy and content every moment of every day and wants to spend every waking moment with her baby. If she doesn't, then something must be wrong with her. And so they are ashamed to talk about that because they know, or they at least feel, that they will be regarded badly or will be judged by people around them.
You're feeling completely raw, and we're supposed to feel really strong,
I think perfectionism needs to be thrown out when it comes to motherhood, because there's no such thing in any area of anyone's life, but especially when it comes to parenting and being a mother. I grew up with this notion that it existed, and I'm still struggling with letting it go, but I think there's no shame in saying, doing things minimally sometimes is okay.
Most parents want to do things right, and in fact I think they start out thinking they will do things right and probably that they'll be perfect parents, and it's not possible to be a perfect parent. And in fact I think it's probably what makes us rich in who we are.
So we've seen that for many people, postpartum depression or perinatal depression is an issue, and yet many people do not seek support. Why is that?
It's the stigma associated with mental health disorders and having a diagnosis of a mental illness. And this stigma is so substantive for some families that they don't want to reach out for support. because there's the expectation that this is a happy time, that families should be really joyful, and it can be a really difficult experience for a woman who isn't experiencing joy interacting with her baby, and being able to come forward and actually admit that. It's stigma that causes that barrier for her to come forward and seek effective treatment and support that's available.
So what can we do about that?
So it's important to open up the conversation more publicly. And so shows like this that raise the awareness of the public in terms of the importance of mental health and overall health and well-being, being really supportive and kind to women and open and less judgmental, because we know that mothers are really self-critical and that they have very high expectations. And it's really important to ensure that expectations are realistic, and that mothers are really as kind to themselves as they are to their children and their families.
So what can happen to a woman or to her baby who doesn't seek support?
So untreated depression can be quite severe and debilitating both for the woman and her family. So it can turn into a more of a chronic mental illness if she doesn't seek support and help early. The severity of the illness can escalate as well. And it can impact the way she feels about herself, the way she interacts with her family, with others. She may withdraw, and this withdrawal from interacting with her baby can have a significant impact on the child's emotional and social development, as well as their cognitive development, which can have a lifelong lasting impact on that child's life and also the life of that woman and her family. We also know that perinatal depression affects fathers as well.
And we're going to come to that in a minute. But for now, I'm thinking this is so very important. How can people in the entourage of a family, of new parents, how can they recognize that someone is suffering from perinatal or postpartum depression?
So there are a number of signs and symptoms that are associated with perinatal depression and anxiety. There's the classic signs that everyone thinks of in terms of sadness and feelings of hopelessness or worthlessness. But there's also signs that typically people don't associate with depression, like anger or irritability. Withdrawal is also one of those signs. So if the woman isn't doing what she normally does and interacting with her family or her friends, doesn't take pleasure in the things that she normally would, those are a lot of the signs that she may be experiencing perinatal depression or anxiety. Also, there can be changes in the way she's thinking, her ability to make decisions, her eating patterns, her sleeping patterns. And often the woman herself isn't attuned to those signs and symptoms and what's happening to her. And it may be those around her that actually are first to pick up on those signs and symptoms. We know that doctors diagnose perinatal depression and anxiety, and so that's how it would be confirmed, is the woman would see her doctor, the doctor would determine the need for treatment and other therapies that are available. Also in the province of BC, public health nurses offer perinatal depression screening to determine if there's a risk of perinatal depression and anxiety, and then refer on to the family physician, provide extra support as needed, and really link her with additional supports in the community.
Now, we know that many, many, many new mums have something called the baby blues. And let's just take a look and see how someone can tell the difference between the baby blues and perinatal or postpartum depression.
Great.
You know, sometimes people think, well, if I'm crying, I have a depression. It's not just recurrent tearful episodes. It's when a woman is persistently depressed throughout the day, most of the day, for 2 weeks or more.
We've been using the term perinatal depression, postpartum depression. Is there anything that our viewers need to know about these terms?
So perinatal refers to the period from conception up to 1 year postpartum. So many people consider postpartum depression and don't give much thought to prenatal depression, which can be quite as common as postpartum depression. So we like to talk about the span of perinatal depression. So being cognizant that women can be at risk for depression at any time throughout their pregnancy and also up to 1 year following the birth of their child.
This is very helpful. Thank you. Now, you mentioned a minute ago that it's not just mums who are susceptible to having perinatal or postpartum depression. So that's very interesting. Well, one does not have to be a biological parent.
No, just being a parent, whether you are a father, a biological parent, perhaps a same-sex parent, or an adoptive parent, anyone can be at risk for perinatal depression and anxiety. So it's not just based on biology or those hormonal fluctuations that we typically think about with pregnancy or in the postpartum period, but it's a culmination of a number of factors. We all know that being a new parent can be very stressful, and that can certainly have an impact on depression. Also, we know that many parents are sleep deprived, up at night looking after their baby and not having enough time in their life or the circumstances that allow them to rest and get enough sleep. So there are a number of things that can come together as risk factors for perinatal depression and anxiety. So I think that fathers are often not talked about very much in terms of depression. We know that if a mother is experiencing depression, that it can put the father at risk as well.
Let's see what the next video tells us about fathers and postpartum dynamics.
In a traditional society, where there was extended family and tribe and clan and village, the whole community coalesces around the mother to support the mothering task, including the father. What we've got in our society is we've got an isolated nuclear family unit. The extended family no longer exists for a lot of people. Clan, tribe, community, neighborhood are no longer existent. And so parents are very much on their own. In that situation, the role of the father becomes exaggeratedly important. So he becomes the main support, and sometimes the only support for the mom. But then he has to go to work. So the woman is very often isolated in a home with a baby, which is never meant to be the way babies were supposed to be parented. From the evolutionary perspective, it's a complete aberration. And even in human history, it's very new. So the father has more pressure on him than is healthy. In families where the extended family is still intact, with a lot of support, this is not so. But for many people it is. And then there's another dynamic, which is that we tend to get married young and we're not quite mature yet. We have unmet and unresolved childhood needs. In our society, the men very often look upon the woman as a mother substitute and expect the woman to meet their needs, and women take that on culturally, or they're acculturated to do so. When a child comes along, the man loses out a little bit, to the extent that the man still needed mothering from the wife, and the wife is now occupied with looking after the real baby, the little baby. Some men may feel, unconsciously at least, deprived. Then they act out, and this is when I would see some men having affairs while their wives were looking after a baby. Or this is when men get abusive, because all of a sudden they're losing out on something and they're not mature enough to realize what's going on. They just get angry at the woman.
While we think about some of the messages that Dr. Gabor Mate has just given us, we're going to take a short break and we'll see you back in a minute.
A child's early years are foundational for lifelong mental and physical health. KidCareCanada Society is a charitable organization incorporated in the province of British Columbia. We seek to empower families to raise their children to be socially and emotionally healthy, and ensure families and those who support them have easy access to relevant, current research at no cost to the end user. Our appealing videos, now being captioned in various languages, feature world-renowned experts and real families. To access these videos and other free resources, log on to KidCareCanada.org.
Welcome back to Not Just the Baby Blues with Carolyn Solomon. Carolyn, one of the really important messages you wanted to share with us was about self-care.
So self-care is important for all of us, but particularly for women and families where the focus is on caring for their baby. And without caring for themselves first, it makes it really challenging for them to have the energy and the mental health and well-being to be able to effectively care for their child as well as take care of themselves.
So true.
And so self-care is about those little strategies that families can incorporate in their everyday lives. And there's a really helpful little acronym, and it's called the NEST S.
All right, let's take a look at that now.
N stands for nutrition, E stands for exercise, S stands for sleep and rest, T stands for time for self, and S stands for support.
We're going to be talking about support again later, but what would you like to say about nutrition?
So nutrition is one of those areas that can be really difficult for new families, particularly with the time constraints of caring for their infant, and can all be a very overwhelming experience. So really making sure that women and families take time every day to eat 3 meals, have easy to prepare snacks on hand, that they're drinking enough fluids, eating a variety of foods, and perhaps thinking about eating when they're actually feeding their baby. So taking that time as well to really listen to their cues about when they're hungry and need to refuel so that they have the energy to take care of their child and themselves.
One of the things that my daughter and her friends have done when they've had new babies is they invite people over with a meal.
Yes. And I think being proactive and supporting families by providing a meal that they can tuck away in their freezer and have on hand when the new baby arrives is good proactive planning.
Let's do the next letter.
Sure. So E stands for exercise. And many people think that exercise needs to be long or it needs to be really strenuous in order to have a benefit. We do know, though, that even taking short activity breaks through their days is really important. So I like to talk about the 5-minute rule. So sometimes getting started is the hardest part. So just getting outside, taking a walk, starting that walk for 5 minutes, and then seeing if you can progress, and each day building on your activity and exercise. It's important also too to check with your doctor just to make sure that you're exercising, within the limits that are right for you and your health, particularly if you've had a cesarean section.
I was just thinking that. What's that first S?
The first S is sleep and rest. Yes. So we know that many parents are sleep deprived. I think this is one of those areas in particular that parents need to reach out for extra support. So there may be times when they can nap when the baby naps, they can have someone take their infant so that they can have an opportunity even just to get some downtime for themselves. So whether it's making a list and thinking about what can I defer to later, lowering their expectations of what needs to be done over the course of the day, and thinking about those areas where they can get extra support so that they can make their sleep and rest a real priority.
New parents can be very hard on themselves, but as Enid Elliott was telling us, nobody needs to be perfect.
Exactly.
And that T then, that fits in quite well with the time, doesn't it?
Very much so. So taking time for self is one of the most protective factors against perinatal depression and anxiety, and something that very few mothers and families do for themselves. And so we talked about having those realistic expectations. So thinking about your to-do list for the day, thinking about what's realistic, and then I tell families to scale that back so that they can actually do things or embed things in their lives that uplift them, that bring them joy, whether it's taking a walk, going out in nature, having an opportunity to connect with other adults, so going out with a friend, having coffee, and taking just some time just for themselves that can be away from their baby. Many mothers also experience guilt about taking time for self. and not realizing how very important that is, not only to care for themselves, but also to be an effective parent.
This is a very good lead in to the last S, which is support.
Support. So support is critical. So maintaining and building healthy relationships, building that community of support, and parents need to think about this early on before they have a baby. For many parents, it can be an overwhelming experience that they don't anticipate. And it's up to all of us to reach out and support the pregnant women and those with young children to really make sure that they get those adequate supports so that they can care for themselves, which would then enable them to care for their children. So whether it's making new connections through attending prenatal classes, connecting with parents that are going through similar circumstances, spelling each other off for child care as needed, and really being proactive in creating that community of support. Also, knowing ways to kind of offer support to women and families, and not only asking them once, perhaps when the new baby arrives, but being there at regular times throughout that child's life to be able to offer support as that child grows and develops.
You have offered such wonderful advice, and you're doing this as part of your role with the Ministry of Health.
Yeah, so with the Ministry of Health, supporting healthy pregnancies as well as healthy infant growth and development is a key priority. So certainly the ministry has a strong focus on promoting the health of all British Columbians. Within the scope of my role, I lead Healthy Start, which aims to improve provincial consistency in the public health services that are available for both pregnant women as well as women and families who are in the early years, and so that they do get the supports needed for optimal health and well-being. We're very much family focused at the ministry and taking into consideration the lived experiences of families in the work that we do. And so being family centered really means putting the patient and the family at the center of care, working with them so that they're really informed and that they retain control over the choices that they make and that they're key partners in their care.
Let's look at a video that talks about self-care.
A lot of women really believe that they have to be super moms, super women, super moms, and that relaxation is not necessary. This is a great area of improvement for most women. Relaxation is not a luxury, it is a necessity.
Moms absolutely have to take a break from time to time and have time for showering and eat and drink. And I know it sounds almost impossible to do, but you actually have to keep in mind that if you are out of oxygen, then you are not going to be able to do a good job taking care of your child.
It's very important for women who have postpartum depression to make sure they feed themselves regularly throughout the day. They get pretty busy with baby and forget to feed themselves. So we really encourage them, to eat their 3 meals and to take time for a little break and a snack in between.
For postpartum moms, they're often putting themselves second to babe or to their family needs. So just eating well, getting enough sleep, getting some exercise, and having some social interaction with close friends can do a world of good to lift her mood.
A video I know you wanted people to look at was about the role of community. What can people do when they know that a family member or a friend seems to be suffering from perinatal depression?
I think it's important to gently point out to the woman about some of the signs and symptoms that they're noticing without being critical, and encouraging the woman to open up, share her feelings, validate her experience, and offer support. So there may be some helpful things that can be said to parents to really work with them in a way that is non-judgmental.
Thank you for this, Carolyn. Thank you so much for coming. We're going to encourage people to go to the website and to look at some of the recommendations by Dr. Carolyn Steinberg, who talks about asking instead of suggesting things,
Yes.
or you can suggest things that will hopefully people will get a chance to take a look at that. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. To learn more, please log on to KidCareCanada.org, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and remember, we're here to support you on your journey as a parent.